What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Zach Baker and Dr. Josh Funk. You are listening to the Strength and Knowledge Podcast, and today we're going to give a quick answer to a question that came in through social media. And with this, the question was based around what is something that is going to make your staff unhappy? Or the way it was kind of rephrased was, you will make your staff unhappy if you don't do this or you don't address this. So, Josh, I think you're probably the person most suited to answer this question. What will make your staff unhappy?
I think a big thing that comes to mind for me, is going to be lack of transparency, but then sometimes also being too transparent about what is going on and potentially having too many initiatives of which your team is involved with. More is not more, and less is a problem. Trying to find Goldilocks as it relates to the level of transparency and then communicating to your staff what exactly is being worked on. If we are trying to throw 17 darts at the same time and never hitting a bullseye and then communicating to our staff that they're not meeting expectations, that creates a lot of stress. So it is up to you as a leader to centralize efforts, know your team, have conversations with your team about what is actually achievable, what is able for us to be done with our current workflow, current level of preparation, current efficiencies from a company standpoint. And I think overall, then you find yourself being a lot more like a sniper as it relates to the darts that you're throwing. Your team appreciates it very much because they're also able to be successful. And that's your job as a business owner. So your job as a leader is to position people in places where they can achieve success. So finding that sweet spot as it relates to transparency, and then finding that sweet spot as it relates to the efforts of the company.
I love that. And I think what really hits home for me is, and I've noticed this, I've gotten to be a part of several different teams growing up. I've worked for several different companies. I've done internships at different places. And I think one thing that I compliment you on, I hope that others in the company feel this way as well, is you provide a very good avenue to receive feedback. People are able to communicate with you what their concerns are, what their complaints are, and just be very open with what they want you to be aware of. And then I think what you do a good job of is communicating back to them, hey, number one, I hear you, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. And then kind of triaging for them, how are we going to address this moving forward? And unfortunately, sometimes in the workplace, sometimes in life, things just aren't perfect. It's the compromise of running a business. There are certain advantages to being small, certain advantages to being large. Whatever you emphasize on one end of the spectrum, you're going to have to compromise on another. So I think making your staff and your colleagues aware of why things are the way that they are. And oftentimes, those little inconveniences throughout the day, if they understand what led to them being an inconvenience and how something else in the company is better because of that, then they don't worry about it nearly as much. Part two to that is the recognition and honestly, just the ability to say, oh, crap. I didn't realize that was an issue, or I was completely unaware. We can easily fix that. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. And then the third part of it is, you know what? That is a problem. I don't have an answer right now, but we're going to find an answer. And we're going to figure out what other people have done in the past. We're going to figure out who the best person is to utilize as a resource for this. And all that circles around that central tenet, like you mentioned before, communication and transparency. And as long as people are well informed, they feel like they are a part of the process, they feel like they're a part of the solution, and you get a lot more collaborative effort on everybody's part. So,
yeah, and I think a big thing there is making sure that there is two-way conversation. I think that's a big part of you being aware of your team's efforts with regards to you finding that sniper for the darts that you're looking to throw. And then also having a conversation where there's at least a certain level of understanding as to why you might be working on certain things, why other things aren't currently able to be changed, how you're potentially working through problems, why something's getting prioritized in front of others. So that's where I think the transparency then becomes something where it's a two-way conversation, and there's a level of understanding there that allows people to feel aligned with the company. It's one thing where there's transparency in one direction, and there's feedback potentially communicated in one direction from them to me, or there's me communicating company initiatives out and not receiving anything back and forth. The two-way conversations, having things that are less top-down or hierarchical, I think overall has led to us to be in a situation where we're able to move forward, where I largely think a lot of our company feels aligned. They ideally don't feel too overly stressed with some of the initiatives that we have going on from a company, and overall level of understanding about where we're headed.
That's awesome. I look at the organizational hierarchy of a company where you have an owner, you have a leadership team, and then you have your staff members that are kind of like your in the trenches, day-to-day people. It's no different than a football team. You have a head coach, you have an offensive coordinator, and then you have your offensive players. The players are running the plays on the field. They are coming off the field and telling the coordinator, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what I'm going up against. This is what's working, what's not working. The coordinator takes that information and has to figure out, hey, is this a scheme issue or are you guys just not executing? And then if it is a scheme issue, they got to go to the head coach and say, hey, how does this scheme now fit into the overall game plan that we had with our special teams, with our defense, and everything else? So I've heard that analogy before. I love it. But again, this question that we got today was one that was fielded to us from our audience. So if you have questions that you want answered, chime in, shoot us an email, get in touch on social. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, like, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Strength and Knowledge Podcast.